Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan. On this Sunday evening, November 14th, 2021. And if you'd like additional weather information, you can always go to weather.gov/Alaska. If you have any questions, concerns, or interesting reports or photos to pass along, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. Well, we have a lot to talk about this evening. We have low pressure in the Bering, the front that is working its way now through the Aleutian chain, the eastern Aleutians, and it'll be crossing the Alaska Peninsula on Monday. There'll be a wave of low pressure develop on the Pacific side just south of the Alaska Peninsula as we go through the day Monday. That's going to become the main player. It's going to spin up a low in the Gulf. But in the meantime, high pressure continues from eastern Russia across the central interior into northwest Canada, producing widespread sub-zero temperatures. And in fact, it was as cold as 33 below zero this morning at Bettles. Aniak in the southwest interior got down to 25 below, and it was 15 below in Gulkana in the upper Copper River Basin. But this low will be forming in the Gulf, and by Tuesday it'll be in the central Gulf. That's going to fling a fair amount of moisture up toward the Panhandle, and as a result, a winter storm watch has been issued for northern portions of the Panhandle for portions of Tuesday into Wednesday, and that I'll show you in just a moment. Otherwise, those of you looking for milder weather, it's not going to happen anytime soon. Below normal temperatures are forecast to continue through mid-month and past Thanksgiving. We're also going to see the potential for some stronger gap winds develop on the backside of that low here as we head through midweek. That could impact southwest and south central areas of the state. Let's take a look at a couple of the webcams from this afternoon. Clear skies there, Bettles. They were 33 below zero this morning, one of the colder readings to report in the state. And then going to the northern Panhandle, Skagway, snow is coming for Tuesday into Wednesday. In fact, winter storm watch has been issued for Skagway and White Pass areas where as much as 5 to 12 inches of snow could fall from Tuesday afternoon through Wednesday afternoon. And taking a look at the hazardous weather map, we do have winter storm watches that have been posted for portions of Tuesday. Yakutat would be Tuesday into late Tuesday night, and then areas around, including Haines and on over toward White's Pass and Skagway for later Tuesday afternoon in through Wednesday afternoon, where snowfall amounts could be on the order of 6 to as much as 12 inches. Other areas further south in the Panhandle will see snow changing over to rain, so we'll have more on that as we go through the day tomorrow. Updates on the latest potential warnings or advisories to replace the watch. So precipitation on Monday, there'll still be some showery precipitation there and through the Panhandle on Monday, but you can see a push of 1 inch or more liquid equivalent moving up across much of the Panhandle from Yakutat south and eastward. So it'll be a pretty good dose of moisture. On the backside of the low, it'll be sitting in the central Gulf on Tuesday. That's where we're going to have some of the stronger northeast to north winds turning northwesterly on the backside of that low, and those offshore outflow gap winds could produce wind chills as cold as 40 below zero starting Tuesday night, but especially Wednesday into Wednesday night, early Thursday for the Kuskokwim, Susitna, as well as Copper River Basin. So likely the Anchorage office will be issuing some sort of wind chill advisories for that coming up. Looking at the satellite imagery, still have a curl in the clouds there out over the Gulf. That's a weaker area of low pressure that'll continue to weaken, but look at the enhanced clouds now moving into the Alaska Peninsula there from the eastern Aleutians, and that's where the frontal wave will be eventually developing as we head through the overnight and early on Monday. Another low extends back out toward the western Bering. That's the parent low that is the main feature, but as that energy shifts east-southeastward and emerges into the North Pacific and southwestern Gulf, that's when we're going to see the low get organized and then begin to lift northeastward up into the central Gulf by Tuesday. Again, we can see the curl in the clouds there across the northern central Gulf this Sunday afternoon, but it's not the main player. The occluded front that's working its way now into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula is going to transfer some of that energy to spin up that low that will impact the panhandle, especially as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday. Farther north, low pressure sits up in the Arctic Ocean, well off the Arctic coast, and the circulation around that keeps some snow showers going there along the Arctic coast back into the northwest coast. So here's the weather map this Sunday afternoon. Weak low pressure there lingering across the Gulf and just off the panhandle, producing some showers. And then back to the west, we have the occluded front working its way through the eastern Aleutians. The really cold air that's out over the interior has managed to push out into the eastern Bering. That's why we kind of have a little stationary front that demarks where the Arctic air has kind of been stopped, and then the occluded front that's working its way eastward. High pressure is situated there, the Yukon, central Yukon Valley up onto the south side of the Brooks Range, and that's going to be the feature that keeps the cold air going, as that colder air will be building across the interior as we head through this week. So overnight, we'll begin to see a frontal wave develop just south of the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, so that by Monday afternoon, we'll have a low that's developing just to the south of the Alaska Peninsula, and that's going to become the main player for the weather that'll impact portions of the Gulf here as we go into Tuesday. And then looking to the north, we have a ridge of high pressure from eastern Russia across the northern half of the state into northwest Canada. And by Tuesday afternoon, we'll have that low situated in the central Gulf, flinging a lot of moisture up into the panhandle and stronger winds on the backside of that. Drier air across the Alaska Peninsula, southwest interior. And as I mentioned, those stronger gap winds will also produce some pretty darn cold wind chills down to 40 below as we get into especially later Tuesday night, Wednesday, and Wednesday night. So low temperatures Monday morning, generally around freezing. The southern panhandle, the Copper River Basin, around Glen Allen will easily get down in 15 below or so. Single digits in Anchorage and sub-zero readings on the other side of the Alaska Range, Upper Kuskokwim, and then highs Monday afternoon only near zero there in the Copper River Basin. Teens elsewhere. Coastal areas could still see some readings around the 30s, especially in through the Panhandle. And then Tuesday morning lows quite a bit colder there, 22, 25 below at Glen Allen, 20 below-ish at McGrath, and probably down near or a bit below zero even into Anchorage, given the recent snow cover there that fell late last week. And then Tuesday afternoon, temperatures will moderate along at least the outer coastal area of the Panhandle back up into the lower 40s, allowing the precipitation to change over to rain, especially by Wednesday. Interior, though, there some heavier snowfall will be likely, especially around Haines, Skagway, and back toward Yakutat. And then temperatures will be quite cold again Monday morning. Some areas could still be back down around 25, 30 below zero, and expect the cold to continue to build across the Yukon Valley, south slopes of the Brooks Range. Elsewhere along coast, single digits in the Arctic coast, teens along the Seward coast, and temperatures even a bit colder, easily in the 25, maybe even isolated 35 below zero reading here by Tuesday morning. And temperatures remain sub-zero throughout the Yukon Valley, with temperatures along the northwest coast, especially west coast, getting up to the teens. Monday morning lows will be well below zero across the interior, seeing that Aniak got down to 25 below. They'll likely, that low temperature Monday morning isn't cold enough. And back out across the Aleutian chain, the temperatures will stop in the upper 30s with that frontal system pushing east into the Alaska Peninsula. High temperatures Monday afternoon will remain near or a bit below zero, the upper Kuskokwim, middle Yukon valleys, but only in the teens elsewhere. You'll see some lower 40s creep up into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutian chain. Tuesday morning lows, though, across the interior will be well below zero. And we'll see lows still down around freezing as far southwestward as Cold Bay, False Pass. And then as we go into Tuesday afternoon, highs again, generally in the single digits across the southwest interior, teens along the west-southwest coast. And looking at temperatures below normal, November 20th through the 24th, so right up through Thanksgiving time. Precipitation should average below normal across the western portion of the state, though above normal, especially across the Panhandle, southern parts of the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather now, and if you have a flight planned for Monday into Tuesday, main weather features will be an extended ridge of high pressure from eastern Russia across the Bering Strait through the interior of Alaska, and then out into northwest Canada. with certainly colder temperatures, especially at the surface with the high pressure in place. And then an area low pressure out through the western Bering will transition as a frontal system works its way through the eastern Aleutians. We will look for a frontal wave or low pressure system develop on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific, and that'll lift northeastward into the central Gulf. That in turn will bring rain and snow into the Panhandle Tuesday afternoon, continuing into Wednesday, and some of the snow could be on the heavier side, especially across parts of the central and northern Panhandle. Monday morning, though, I look for a pocket of IFR there, Yukon Flats back toward north central side of the Alaska Range, and then along the frontal system out through the Alaska Peninsula back in through the Bering. Monday afternoon, MVFR conditions persist there across the Yukon Flats, North Slope, as well as much of the Gulf, and then IFR conditions are anticipated across the Alaska Peninsula, especially in the eastern half of the Aleutians up through the central Bering. And Tuesday morning, there could be a pocket of IFR conditions in the upper Copper River Basin, with IFR conditions beginning to develop through the central Gulf, back through the Alaska Peninsula, and out through the central Bering. And then finally, by Tuesday afternoon, as that low pressure gets a little better organized and deeper moisture works its way northeastward, we expect widespread IFR conditions across the Panhandle Tuesday afternoon into Tuesday night and Wednesday, and IFR conditions along the spine of the Brooks Range in through the North Slope. Past conditions Monday, Anaktuvik will see generally VFR conditions, but further north, as you get north of the north entrance through the North Slope, MVFR conditions will prevail. Adigan Pass will generally hold on to MVFR conditions Monday, though VFR conditions will be more prevalent the further south you fly of the south entrance. Generally, VFR conditions will hold at Lake Clark and Merrill on Monday. Rainy Pass could see some MVFR conditions in the morning becoming VFR. And same thing, Windy Pass, MVFR in the morning becoming VFR, though some IFR conditions could lag the further north you fly from the north entrance. And then for Isabel, look for generally VFR conditions on Monday, though MVFR conditions will prevail the further north you fly of the north entrance. And Metasta, we are looking for generally VFR conditions to hold. Tanita, as well as Portage, will see VFR conditions prevail on Monday, as will Chilkoot and White, though keep in mind by Tuesday, especially Tuesday afternoon, IFR conditions will become widespread across the Panhandle. Freezing levels Monday morning. The surface freezing levels are down to around False Pass, Cold Bay, as well as the outer portions of the southwestern Panhandle, including Sitka and Craig. And we do see a brief rise in freezing levels between 2,000 and 4,000 feet through the eastern Aleutians, tip of the Alaska Peninsula, in association with that weakening occluded front that will be working its way eastward. Greatest threat for icing will be between 5,000 and 15,000 feet there along and just south of the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, and then back between 5,000 and 10,000 feet out over the central Aleutians, and also an area between 5,000 and 11,000 feet just to the southwest of Haida Gwaii in the lower Gulf and North Pacific. And then looking at jet stream level winds, northwesterly winds prevalent across much of the Alaska interior between 60 and 70 knots, a broad area of stronger winds at 30,000 feet in excess of 100 knots there, the lower and southeast portion of the Gulf and North Pacific, and then 75 knot winds out of the northwest, the western half of the Aleutian chain. Dropping down to 9,000 feet, we see low pressure circulation there north of the eastern Aleutians, with strongest winds 45 to 55 knots there through the central Aleutians. And then dropping down to 3,000 feet, there is a reflection of that low beginning to develop there just along and south of the Alaska Peninsula, extending back to just north of the central and eastern Aleutians, with winds of 40 to 50 knots across parts especially of the central Aleutians. And this will translate to the greatest threat for turbulence surface to 3,000 feet through the central back toward the western Aleutians on Monday, with winds perhaps upwards to 40, 45 knots between the surface and 3,000 feet. So there's your flight weather. If you are planning a flight, generally check the latest conditions and forecasts. And if you are able to head out, have a safe flight.
So that Galena flood back in 2013 was at the intersection of weather and climate. Rick, I often get questions about the difference between weather and climate. How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, that's a really good question, John. One of the analogies that I like to use, the wardrobe analogy. So in my closet, in my dresser, I've got clothes appropriate for 90-degree weather and 50 below weather. That's the climate part of my wardrobe. But what I'm going to put on today, am I going to wear my Hawaiian shirt because it's going to be a hot July day, or am I going to wear my bunny boots because it's going to be 50 below? That's the weather part of my wardrobe.
You know, there's another interesting analogy. I've heard it said that climate is like your personality, whereas weather is like the mood you're in today. It's like that old John Denver song. Some days are diamonds and some days are stones. That's how weather works.
Of course, it's really a continuous range. Just as the Galena ice jam flooding was the result of a weather event, that ice jam, up against that cold spring, a climate event. So too with less impactful events. For instance, a daily record high temperature is a weather event, one day's high. But we put that in a climate context, say comparing to a century or more of individual temperatures on a given date.
So these extreme events like record high temperatures also happen on the seasonal time scale. Just in the last few years, we've had what was called a marine heat wave in the waters south of Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea. The water temperatures in that area set new records in 2015 and 2016.
And most Alaskans are acutely aware that big wildfire seasons are becoming more and more common, most recently in 2015. And the frequency of million-acre seasons has doubled since the early 1990s.
Just this past winter, we had another event in the Bering Sea. The ice extent in the Bering was lower than it had ever been in the last 150 years. That's about as far back as the good records go. There'd never been another year like this one in the Bering with so little sea ice. That had major impacts on the communities along the west coast and the northwest coast.
So, John, what have you been hearing from folks around town about these kind of climate extremes?
I've heard from a number of people who've been here a long time that winters just aren't what they used to be. The average temperatures are higher than they were back in the 1960s and 1970s, and we just don't get the extreme cold days, the days down in the minus 50s or even the minus 60s that we used to experience in Fairbanks back in the 1960s, 1970s, and even into the 1980s.
Well, and it's not just winter either. 2016 and 2017, the summers brought unusually muggy, humid weather to Fairbanks. We're not used to thinking of that in interior Alaska, but record high humidities during the summer months. As in the winter, we've had a significant increase in freezing rain events, since about 2000. So much so that DOT has changed their road treatment strategy, and now we have the school district building in winter rain days into the calendar. And of course, we all need good weather forecasts for these high impact weather events.
We know, though, that weather forecasts are sometimes wrong just 3 or 4 days in advance. So if these weather forecasts and the models they're based on can't pick up events like freezing rain 3 or 4 days ahead, how can we believe what they say about climate for the future?
Well, that's a really good question, John. And I think the important thing to remember is that parts of the system are predictable.
So climate models can't give you weather for particular days or even for particular months or years. They actually predict averages. These are averages over periods of a decade or two, or even averages over periods of several years. So they don't give us the month-to-month information that we might want. What are they telling us about the future, though?
Well, these climate models are telling us on the decades-long time frames that warmer winters are going to become more common. We're going to have more frequent, very low sea ice years with late freeze up and early melt out. And the same will be true on Alaskan rivers. We'll have more frequent seasons when freeze up is late and break up is early.
One of the other common threads in these climate model predictions is that heavy rain events and heavy snow events will become more common in the future. That's actually a prediction that the models make for mid-latitudes as well as for high latitudes in areas like Alaska. So we can expect the heavy downpours to become heavier and the heavy winter snows to become heavier than we've been used to. They're also predicting more frequent freezing rain events, getting back to what you talked about earlier. These events that might have happened just once every year or two in the past could actually end up happening several times in a winter in the future, according to the climate models.
And it is important to remember that even in a warming world, there are still going to be seasons and years that are colder than the average, but these cold seasons will become less and less common. So, John, maybe I don't need to have those bunny boots in my closet anymore?
Well, at least you won't need to wear them as often as you did in the past.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Now it's time for marine weather, and we start with the sea ice edge. And ice has developed extensively now across the North, the Arctic and Northwest Arctic coast in through the Chukchi Sea, and this trend will continue as even colder air continues to build, especially throughout the northern and interior portions of the state. We also see the ice developing further south along the southwest coast, the YK deltas into Bristol Bay. And this trend will only continue as some rather cold offshore flow develops here for midweek as low pressure takes shape in through the Gulf, and winds on the backside of that out of the northeast and north, eventually turning northwesterly, will allow the cold air to funnel out over the water from the mainland. For the Panhandle on Monday, we are looking for winds up through Lynn Canal gusting as high as 40 knots, waves 5 feet along the coast. Winds will be out of the west-northwest, 15 to 20 knots, with waves of 5 to as high as 9 feet down to off of Craig. And then as low pressure gets better organized in through the Gulf, we'll see winds across the inner canals gusting up to 35 knots out of the southeast and east, though still retaining a northerly component there in Lynn Canal, with waves of 4 to as high as 9 feet down there toward Dixon Entrance, and then out of the south and southeast up to 30 knots, and waves generally 7 to 11 feet. On Monday, for the south central areas, off the Kenai, northwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Otherwise, look for northerly to northeasterly flow to gradually increase through the day, generally around 20 knots in Cook Inlet with waves of 3 to 4 feet. Also 3-footers in Prince William Sound. And as that low gets better organized on Tuesday in the Gulf, winds will be generally northeast to north, around 30 knots out over the open waters there at the Gulf with waves 6 to 7 feet. And some channeling there, 25 to 30 knot winds, the lower Cook Inlet with 10-foot waves there at the mouth of Cook Inlet. For Monday, across Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, winds will generally be ahead of low pressure that's going to frontal wave that'll develop south of Sand Point. Winds will be northeasterly Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, 20 to 30 knots. Waves 3 to 5 feet around Kodiak Island, 6 feet there in Bristol Bay, and upwards to 10 feet with westerly winds there east of Falls Pass. Tuesday, winds will be out of the northeast and north, picking up there across at least the north side there, the Bering side, 6 to 8 foot waves and 25 knot winds out of the north-northwest, 9 to 10 foot waves on the Pacific side. So Monday, the Aleutian chain, the frontal system will have worked its way eastward. Eastern Aleutians winds will be a bit lighter there around Dutch Harbor, but pick up Central Aleutians, they're 30 knots out of the west with waves between 12 and 14 feet. And then on Tuesday, winds do come down across the region, a bit of a mix there in the eastern half of the Aleutians, and then turning a little more toward the west by the time you get out in the far western end there past Kiska. Waves generally 6 to 8 feet on the Bering side and 8 to 10 feet on the North Pacific side. Look for winds off the southwest mainland out of the east northeast on Monday with waves as high as 8 to 12 feet there as you get out towards St. Matthew. And then as we go into Tuesday, look for north and northeasterly winds to continue across the eastern Bering at around 20 to as high as 25 knots off of the south end of Nunavik Island, and waves generally running 6 to 8 feet, only 3 feet there though in Norton Sound. And across the Arctic coast, winds will be northwest to west at 15 to 20 knots with ice in place. Lower Chukchi Sea, look for northwest to north winds 10 to 15 knots with ice increasing. Waves where there are open areas 2 to 3 feet. And waves could be as high as 9 feet on the north side of St. Lawrence with easterly winds up to 30 knots. And then on Tuesday, across much of the region, winds will be out of the north to northeast, 10 to 15 knots along the Arctic coast and 15 to 20 knots lower Chukchi Sea in through the Bering Strait with waves there where there is open water 4 to 6 feet. Quick check of the surface maps again. Monday, we'll see a wave of low pressure developing along that weakening frontal boundary. It's just south of the Alaska Peninsula with high pressure in place from eastern Russia across the central mainland into northwest Canada. And the low will become more organized in the Gulf on Tuesday. That'll bring heavier snow to portions, especially the northern panhandle, and windier outflow gap winds along the backside of that low across south central and southwest portions of the state. So that does it for tonight's weather show. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back again Monday evening. Please join me.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.